and welcome to TSB Means Business, a program brought to you by the Savings Bank. I'm Allie Houghton, and I will be your host on today's program. Joining me is Pete Johnston, Senior VP and Senior Commercial Banking Officer, Nick Kafalis, VP Commercial Banking, and Michael Rodriguez, Information Support Specialist with the Savings Bank. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about how businesses can be a little more knowledgeable and protect themselves against cybersecurity. So Michael, when we use this term cybersecurity, what are we really saying?
So that's actually a very wide topic, right? It has a wide scope. When we're talking cybersecurity, we're talking the security of information. I tend to look at information as one of our biggest assets in any business, our data. So a definition that I tend to use when I try to define cybersecurity is the body of technology, protocols, processes designed to protect your network, your computers, your data, your programs from any kind of damage, theft, or any unauthorized access. So it's one of those terms that everybody uses, and it means different things to different people because it touches so many different components.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Pete and Nick, as bankers and particularly lenders, what's your perspective on cybersecurity and keeping customers' data protected?
What I have found is every time I think about doing something for a customer, I think about have I done that for myself in the world of banking? Mm-hmm. And what I realized is that all of the information that I have, all of the information that's specific to me or to my family is really important information that I'm okay with sharing it with people I want to share it with, but that I don't want to have it shared with people that aren't, as Michael said, authorized. Mm-hmm. As Michael said, it's one of the biggest assets that any business has is the data that they have access to, and the need to have integrity over that data and how you manage it, how you keep it safe. The big thing in the banking industry is safety and security. That's something we all want to show that we have to offer. If you don't have that, if you don't have your customers' trust, you don't have a bank. So we need to keep those things under control, under wraps, on a need-to-know basis, and that's what cybersecurity means to me. Is particularly electronically how we manage that and keep it safe.
Yeah, and also I'll just compound a little bit on that one. I think that it's important. The savings banks puts a lot of effort and a lot of money into cybersecurity and IT. When we receive information from our customers, we make sure that we ask them and we encourage them and recommend that they use our secured email site, because that information can be hacked. We've seen it happen time and time again. And so it's important that our customers know we take that very seriously, and that information is private and it's confidential, and we recommend strongly that they use and work with us to provide that data to us so that we can protect that integrity.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, what's your background in cybersecurity and how did you really get started in it?
So currently,
it's classified.
Yeah,
Can't tell you.
Can't tell you any of it. Yeah, currently I'm part of the cybersecurity committee here at the Savings Bank. Mm-hmm. I'm actually one of the original members. I was fortunate that I had just gotten my bachelor's degree in information security when I came around to the Savings Bank, and as part of the cybersecurity committee, we're really looking at all the, like I mentioned in the definition, we're looking at the policies, and that can be something as simple as how many characters a password is going to have, and all the protocols in place. We also look at the different technologies, because there's a lot of technology out there to help us. Those are all the controls. We have the technical controls that will monitor, who's accessing what, who can access what. We look at being able to control where the data is going. So the Cybersecurity Committee, and it doesn't just comprise of IT, it comprises of all different business units, because security is a team effort. Cybersecurity really is a team effort. It belongs to all of us because we all play a role. We all have to make sure we know where our data is going and really have that mindset where you go, if it was my information, where would I want it to go? Do I want these people to have it? And it's very important to keep that secure, especially for the trust factor. Everybody really wants their personal security to stay secure. That said, as far as my involvement with cybersecurity, I'm going to take you down a trip down memory lane for me, if you will, because it really started way back in the elementary school days. Now, when you're a kid, they ask you where you want to go, what you want to do when you grow up, and I never really had a idea back in those days, but I was like, okay, I want to be a teacher maybe. I enjoyed to teach. I really admired my teachers, but I love science, all the sciences. Fast forward a little bit, in the early 90s, personal computers were more readily accessible, more affordable. I said I have to have one. And so I got myself one. And I'm talking those big boxes with the green screens. There weren't these fancy pictures. You had that dial-up with that funny noise coming through. A buddy of mine, he got one, and then we went and got an outside modem and tried to communicate with each other. That was my passion, but that was a hobby. Fast forward a little bit further into my early adult years. Something that I really took to heart was I have this passion to protect people. So I actually got into law enforcement. So I spent 13 years as a law enforcement officer in different capacities out in Boston. And it was during that time that I actually met my now wife. And I was looking for a career change kind of because of the safety. The entire time I was still the computer guy, so any kind of computer situation I was involved with. And my wife convinced me to go back to school. I went to college. She was my motivation for that. And now I get kind of the trifecta. I get to teach people because I do trainings on cybersecurity. I get to protect people and the information, and I get to play with computers all day. So that's kind of my little mix there.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's a cool story.
Thank you.
What are some of the common security breaches for companies online?
So first I want to discuss the term breach, if you will. Many people think it's this big red X, but think for a moment. We have mobile devices, a phone, a tablet, and most of us in any kind of business will have a business email attached to that mobile device. So picture yourself in a cafe. You've got your mobile phone or your tablet, and an emergency email comes through, or you're preparing for a big important meeting, and it's the same cafe that you go regularly. And someone took notice, so they stand behind you in line as you're getting your coffee, and they're just peering over your shoulder, reading what you have on your email. You've been breached. Now, what happens with that information, that gets a little bit more involved, but that right there is called shoulder surfing. So there's that. There's all types of phishing campaigns is what we call it. It's an email with false pretenses, and the whole idea is to get information from people. So once you give them access, you've been breached. Whatever information you've shared, you've been breached. So I mean, there's a lot of different types of breaches per se, by a lot of different means. It's not one simple answer. It's a plethora of possibilities. The key component is what is going to happen after you've been breached. What kind of information? What are the results exactly?
So you just mentioned one tactic criminals use to get your information. What are some other tactics?
Like I said, they have the phishing campaigns. They'll use emails using false pretenses, and sometimes it'll be attached, or there'll be an attachment. The attachment itself will be a program, some kind of malicious software, or better known as malware, with it. And the intent is for you to click on it so that they can now have access to your equipment or your computer, or wherever your data is stored. And depends on what the attacker wants. What we find nowadays is when you're part of a targeted attack, then it brings on a certain perspective. But there's a lot of other breaches that don't actually come from attackers. So there's the human error factor. As I mentioned earlier, cybersecurity involves all of us. It just takes one person to accidentally forget to secure something, like forgetting to lock your front door, and then someone pushed on it. They weren't thinking of breaking in, but they pushed and they got in there. So attackers will just look around and feel around, do what they call port scanning, just because they're learning computers and they're learning this type of behavior, and they're just looking around without understanding the ethical boundaries that they must respect. So they tend to use that as well. There's social engineering. They might come up to you, again with false pretenses, and try to see, I might hey, Nick, how are you? And try to get a bond going so that I can get that level of trust, and then ease my way into getting some kind of information. One bad habit that most people tend to do is they'll have one password for all of their different applications. So all I need is for you to give me that one password. Or maybe, how do we reset a password nowadays? They'll ask you some personal questions. What was your first job? What's your mother's maiden name? What's your pet's name? If I get that information from Nick, then I can just ask to reset a password. So those are some tactics as well.
Yeah. What do you feel is the best way for a company to protect themselves before they become a victim?
So knowledge is power. Training. That's number one. Know what's out there. Know the different approaches. Understand from your business perspective what level of threat is part of your business perspective. So how much are people targeting your line of work, your line of business? By knowing that, you know how much more secure you need to be. Learn from your peers. Contact other peers and see what they're doing. And another very big one is patching. So Microsoft, when we're talking Windows environment, they send out patches to their programs. The reason for this is technology moves at such a fast pace. There's always something left behind that, now this can be used for this nefarious purpose. So when they catch it, Microsoft or whoever owns the program will say, let's find a way to close it. So we patch it. But now it's up to us to patch, right? So in an organization, we have to make that determination. We need to patch as best as possible to close all the gaps.
So you got to stay one step ahead of the bad guys.
Exactly.
As much as possible.
They're working against you, so you need to make sure to stay up ahead of them. Make their job that much more difficult. So being aware, keeping as much security, especially the known. So keep your ear open. Keep all your news reports coming in for what's happening out there, because it's not always the same thing. It was ransomware yesterday, and today it might be just spear phishing campaigns for a different purpose, or it might be because when we're talking breaches, but when we're talking cybersecurity, bad guys, the attackers might just want to close you down. So there's a major component when talking cybersecurity, and you touched upon two of those. It's confidentiality of the data, the integrity of the data, and the availability of the data. So if I can't steal it from you, maybe I can stop even you from accessing it, and business goes to a halt.
That's the ransomware
Exactly.
approach.
That's exactly
If
the
you want your information back, you've got to pay us to do it.
Exactly. And a final point, although there's plenty more to do, I would always say is have a good backup process in place. Know that you can recover, make sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So.
Yeah. So what if a company finds that they are part of a security breach or they have been breached in some way? What should they do?
So that's a good question. I wish I could give you a generic one answer fits all, but it really depends on the organization. First and foremost, I think every organization, every individual should kind of understand where their information is going, and from a business perspective, you have to understand what might be guiding you. What might be pushing you on as far as regulations, what you need to do. You also need to just understand what the legal aspects of, what the legal ramifications is, the dollar amount for the different securities, a lot of different programs out there to help you out. So, but some of the more generics are, have a good firewall system, let's say, to protect your internal network, no matter how big or small. Little anecdote that we used to talk about is the weakest point is always your home router, right? Everybody has, or the majority of people have internet at home. How many actually change the password to that router, And
Good point.
so I know where Pete lives, and I will follow him home, and I'll try to get onto that Wi-Fi. And if I know what type, he has X type of internet service provider, oh, their routers have this default. Let me see if I can get in there, So that's still connected to business because he might be doing business at home off of his phone or whatever other component. So
That's why I take a different route home every night.
So, but it's what happens,
Yeah.
And it's the easiest way to go in. You always want to, as an attacker, as someone who wants to gain access, you're going to find the easiest way to get the information.
Yeah.
And so you have to know that. Also know that most attackers are very, very, very patient. So they might set a bug in your systems today and not do anything for a year, 2 years, because you might have noticed the blip and then human nature, maybe it was just a glitch, I might not have caught it.
Become desensitized.
And you become desensitized. So you have to keep that aspect in the back of your head. And you should, so talk to legal, figure out what your options are. Have some good firewall rules or a firewall in place. Split up your sensitive information. Don't keep everything in the same location. Try to have some protections. When it comes to cybersecurity, it's always protection in layers. It's not just, well, I have the door that should protect me, but I left all my windows open. So make sure to layer by layer keep everything secure. And it goes beyond the technical. We have a server, so put that in a secure rack. So it's now the physical device is now in a cage that's locked up, and that cage is in a room that's
locked up.
also locked up and has limited access by limited personnel, and that's in a building that needs another means. And you can have detection, you can have cameras or whatever, and it goes depending on the size of your organization. Know where your data is, where your information is, and understand, okay, this device has the most sensitive amount of information, so that if you do get breached, but they breached the less sensitive one, you can maneuver in a certain way. Maybe it had no personal information, no private information. It had data on there, but nothing sensitive, nothing that wasn't already public facing per se. So there's a different approach, and that one's backed up. So maybe we'll just crash that one, reconfigure it, whatever the case may be. So it's know your environment, talk with your team, if you have a team, and if you're a person of a business of one, well, talk to your peers. See what like-minded individual, like-minded businesses do. Again, knowledge is power. So just be ahead of it, understand it, understand what's out there, and then make an educated decision.
There are a lot of good resources out there.
Many, many good resources.
Yeah. So a lot of, especially in the commercial world nowadays, it's very important to kind of do your banking and have that online access to your information, your banking. But there's still some companies out there that are a little hesitant to get involved with online banking and start that because they feel they could be breached. What advice would you give them? Or
well, I understand that perspective, that fear, if you will, especially when you hear on the news so many different organizations tend to broadcast that they've been breached. And let me be clear, and this might be a point of contention. Somebody might argue against me on this one, but it's my belief that the reason that we're hearing more and more breaches happening isn't necessarily because they are happening that much more often, but more because we're getting better at regulating every organization to have to report so that the public does know about them. So number one, if it's, well, they're happening so much more, keep that in mind. It's just that we're now being that much more aware that they're occurring. So besides that, any organization that is trying to do an online banking knows that these things are out there, that this is what people fear, know that attackers would love to get a chance at grabbing any of this information, and therefore they build a cyber program and they hire professionals and they look at the technologies to make sure that they can encrypt and secure all the data that's flowing through there. And cybersecurity is a cyclical process. You know, you find the gaps, you try to figure out how you're going to mitigate those gaps, and you put a stopgap into it. You test it out. You keep it in place. You do another search to see, do I have any more gaps? And rinse, repeat. You know, so it's that whole process. I would say online banking is the wave of the future. It's still great to be at a brick and mortar for certain things, but I mean, I use online banking. It's just part of today's society.
Yeah.
Do you think, Michael, that the fact that banks offer, and I think your point was, if banks are offering it, chances are it's being offered either directly through that bank or through a vendor relationship that bank has that's legitimate, that takes these steps to control that information. And I think, as going back to the theme that our customers' information is our greatest asset, we have a self-serving reason why we want to keep it secure, but we also are all regulated highly in the banking industry, and the regulators and examiners want to come in and make sure that we're doing things by the book and protecting that information. So the big point is, if somebody's offering something, chances are it's not fly-by-night.
Right.
Correct.
It's being done properly.
That's exactly it.
So people are taking steps on your behalf, even if you don't know, to do it. If it's done well, we never know about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Like, this is the first time I ever met Michael, actually. No.
and let me also say, when it comes to security, there is no 100% security. You have a computer. The only way that you keep it secure is by having it off the network, turned off, and no data whatsoever. It's a paperweight.
Yep.
So there's no sense of 100% security.
But how do you conduct business in that case, right?
Correct.
You have
That's that
so there's a
availability.
certain risk-reward aspect to it all.
Exactly.
So if a company out there wanted to learn a little bit more about cybersecurity, where they should get started, all of that, what are some great resources for them to look into?
Well, I'll reiterate and I'll repeat the, reaching out to business partners. There's a lot of networking that goes on as far as the different businesses, and you get like-minded peers and see what they're doing. There's a lot of trusted websites that you can go to. There's the, as far as one federal website, it's called the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. They are a wealth of information. They talk about all the different things that go on. There's another national one called CERT. I forget what the abbreviation is, but it's CERT. And this is another government agency around protecting, and they provide information as far as what they're seeing in the trends, what type of attacks are going, what type of organizations are being sought after. And then, to be honest, most organizations nowadays on their websites will have materials that kind of give you what to look out for, maybe a little digital brochure. And there are classes going on all over the place. So you're not going out there willy-nilly, I would say. Talk to your peers. Go to a location, another business that that you trust, and ask them, hey, where can I get some information?
Trade organizations, chambers of commerce.
Exactly.
Your insurance agent.
Perfect. Because they're all dealing with it.
Yeah.
And, training, knowledge. So, I mean, the information is out there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of looking for it and looking for it from a location or a person, organization that you trust.
It's trustworthy, yeah.
So Nick and Pete, is there anything final you'd like to add, or?
Well, I think, Michael, you've been educational to me. I learned something today. I thank you. I don't have anything else to add, Pete.
No, just to reiterate that I think every bank I know at the savings bank we take our customers' data very seriously. You know, we
Yes,
guard
we
it
do.
as though it's our own because it's been entrusted to us. We'll continue to do that. You know, our systems department, if they're doing their jobs well, they're pretty invisible in a lot of ways. So, but it's nice to know that when we do have issues, that there are people that we can reach to. I joke and say that, you know, it's the first time I'd ever met Michael, my fellow employee at the savings bank. But, you know, I know that when something goes a little awry or is a little different, I know I've got resources at the bank that I can reach out to.
Right.
To you know, and I think everybody needs to do what they can to surround themselves with similar resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and thank you, Michael. That was some great
Yeah,
great
it was my
insight.
pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll be back soon with another edition of TSB Means Business.